You obviously have shown signs of loss of mental acuity. How could it be that you don't want a cognitive exam? How can you justify that as commander-in-chief who's asking for 4 more years?
You start to wonder in the back of your mind, he just walks off the stage and says Zelensky is Putin and makes this major gaffe. And then they're an hour late to the press conference. The Democratic Party is imploding on itself. They're calling for the leader of their party to step down. There's serious concern about whether the president of the United States can run the country if he's awake after 4 p.m. It's time that you wrestle that microphone away and you ask the president of the United States if he's been diagnosed with Parkinson's.
All right, guys, it is Friday. I would say that we're going to go quietly into the weekend, but I think that we're going to get a VP pick this weekend. And as a reminder, we will go live. So if you're not subscribed yet, or you're just watching this because a nice friend shared it with you, then subscribe and hit the notification button. So we'll give you our analysis. But I'm hearing late Sunday, maybe, and you'll hear Mark Halperin in a little bit give you his take on who he's hearing as well as when he's hearing. A lot to get to. And then I want to break down this big boy press conference because more than anything, this was about how Democrats reacted. And then the question is, what's next? He's got a press interview with Lester Holt on Monday. I mean, they are setting themselves up for failure. I got to be honest. I don't like blaming staff, but my goodness, this is ridiculous. I want to break down the thing. Mark Halperin's here. He's going to give us his take and all of his sources and what they're saying. Reagan Reese from the Daily Caller is going to give us her reaction and how the Daily Caller is seeing the reaction to the press conference and what's next. Before I get to it, I want to thank one of our amazing sponsors. There was actually a story out this morning that I'll put up on screen. The IRS has already collected. I've told you about all these people. They've hired 50,000 new agents because of the funding that Democrats have given. They've already recovered over $1 billion going after people. I've told you this over and over again. They got 50,000 agents. They have all the resources of the federal government, and they're coming after us. They want unpaid taxes, business, personal, 10,000, 10 million. It doesn't matter. They don't care. They have all the resources of the federal government at their back, and they're coming after us, and it's showing. Over $1 billion already collected. Now, that's the government side. I'm going to tell you, though, my friends at Tax Network, tnusa.com/Sean Spicer, have already recovered $1 billion for their clients. So they got $1 billion. The government's got $1 billion. But if you're one of these people that gets these notices, a call, a visit from the IRS, trust the people who've recovered $1 billion for us, for the taxpayers, who've saved people money when the IRS comes after you. The folks at tnusa.com/Sean Spicer at Tax Network are the experts. They've got the expertise, the history to save you money and protect you from the IRS. You can call them 1-800-245-6000. Better yet, tnusa.com/Sean Spicer, full name. Trust me, you do not want to engage with the IRS without the expertise of the folks at Tax Network USA. The IRS is not kidding. They want their money. The government and the Democrats want to spend more. So the only way they're going to get it is by coming after you. Do not fare alone. Call or visit the folks at Tax Network USA, tnusa.com, full name Sean Spicer. All right, let's get back to last night. This was the most important press conference of Joe Biden's life. I mean, it is not a joke, folks, to say that his political future was in the balance. Look, I felt for the guy on kind of a human aspect of this. I knew what it was like. I don't want to relive all this, but you remember that first press conference, the whole crowd size thing, right? When I went out there the next day, I knew that my job depended on it. If that press conference bombed, President Trump was going to say, Sean, thanks for your commitment. I mean, I knew it. No one had said it, but I knew it. And I think Biden knew the same thing. And on a human level, I knew that last night. Like, I want him to stay in the race. You guys know that. But I also thought to myself, man, this has got to be tough, walking out there knowing that everybody is watching you. Now, it didn't start strong. Let me just show you this. Before it even starts, he screws up Zelensky. This is like the pregame show. Here is him talking about President Zelensky, and this is what he said.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. He's going to beat President Putin. President Zelensky.
Oh, my God. Oh, you didn't. Well, you thought to yourself, the gaffes are out of your way. Well, then he starts the press conference. He reads the script off the teleprompter. First question comes in, Jeff Mason from Reuters. Jeff, what do you got? Let's take a listen.
I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president.
What?
That I think she was not qualified to be president.
You picked Vice President Trump? Oh, my God. All right. So that's that. Then he gets through. Then that's the beginning. Well, how does he end it? He takes one unscripted question. He gets asked about foreign leaders, and this is the response he gets. There.
This concludes.
Respectfully, earlier you misspoke in your opening answer. You referred to Vice President Harris as Vice President Trump. Right now, Donald Trump is using that to mock your age and your memory. How do you combat that criticism from tonight?
Listen to him.
Listen to him. Listen to Trump. You call him your vice president, then you tell people to listen to him. Holy smokes. Well, luckily, in my opinion, that was it. And I think it stemmed the tide of a lot of major Democratic defections, which were ready to go. They all had those press releases ready to go. This bought Biden some time because we're grading on a curve, and it wasn't as bad as a lot of people thought it could be. He went an hour, not as bad as it could be. But I want to get the breakdown from Mark Halperin and then Reagan Reese from the Daily Caller. I want to remind you that everyone who's gone out there and watched the Front Row Joe documentary that I did is available at salemnow.com. The DVD is out, so you can go to salemnow.com and not only stream it, you can gift it and you can buy the DVD. Thank you for all your support for that. Before I bring in Mark Halperin, though, I want to tell you about one safe bet we can make. The folks at Bishop Gold are where I've invested my money. Now, listen, you get hit up all the time because of this inflation and everything that's going on right now about where you should be investing. There's a lot of talk about precious metals, gold, silver, right? You hear it all the time. You go to Costco, you look online, you see it on TV, radio, everybody's telling you to invest in precious metals. The question is, who knows how to do it well and right? When I took my money and invested in precious metals, in gold and silver, I trusted the folks at Bishop Gold, and that's where I would recommend that you do as well and talk to them. So if you go to bishopgoldgroup.com/Sean, just my first name there, you'll get a free gift, but you'll also get their expertise and understanding of the market. And the beautiful thing about the folks at Bishop Gold Group is that they can talk to you about your individual needs. Maybe you're like me and you just wanted to get in on this, right? I wanted to expand my investment portfolio, get in on this, hedge against inflation, et cetera, right? Maybe you've got an old IRA or a 401k. Depending on your needs, they can craft a plan for you. They can answer all your questions about where would you store the gold or silver, or can they store it for you, or how do you liquidate it? All of that gets solved. Just go to bishopgoldgroup.com/Sean. They will have an unbelievable, insightful conversation about you and your needs. Go to bishopgoldgroup.com/Sean like I did and have a conversation with them. All right, I want to bring in Mark Halperin. He is the author of Worldwide of News. You can follow him at walkingduck.com/Mark. And he hosts these unbelievable two ways. He's got a big announcement at the end of our conversation that you're going to want to pay attention to. All right, let me bring in Professor Mark Halperin. All right, Professor Halperin, give me a grade on last night.
Immaterial. So the people who want him out.
God, I wish I had you as a professor.
People who wanted him out are going to say it doesn't matter either because he was bad or it doesn't matter if he was good. And the people who want him in are going to say he was good enough. That performance, that level of performance without Atlanta would have been gone unnoticed because he's been behaving like that with all of its indications of his decline for years. But in the current context, Republicans were delighted that he did well enough to stay in because they want him in. Democrats who want him out were sad because he didn't do poorly enough to make it apparent he had to go. And so,
yeah, I think
in the arc of will he stay or will he go, it's a net plus for him because between that performance and the Marist NPR poll showing him ahead nationally, I think he ends yesterday and into this morning more secure than he's been all week.
Yeah, I got to admit, the tone of last night did not sound like a guy who has any reservations about his commitment to stay in this race. It was very defiant, very clear that he feels he's got the track record and the level of accomplishments to move forward. I didn't see any hint of somebody who's acknowledging, in the very least, any call to get out.
Yeah, I think they coached him to not be any more defiant than he was, right? Because I could have seen angry old manish. But except for sort of not being super defiant and criticizing his, he expressed sympathy for the members of Congress who were running for their predicament, right? Like, I get it. They're down ballot. They don't want to lose. But on the two central points, the two central arguments that those who want him to step aside make, he said, I'm not behind in the polls, which people snickered at when he first started saying it. But we've now had two polls, the Washington Post poll and the NPR poll, that show him ahead or even. And then the other point is he's saying still the fiction that Atlanta was a one-off, and dodged the question of, why aren't you taking a cognitive test? Because whether you were president or not, you could use a cognitive test. He took defiant positions on those 2 points, both of them arguable. And, again, possession's 9/10 of the law. He has all the delegates. They can't make him give them up. He's going to have to voluntarily choose that. And as you said, nothing he did in the press conference suggests he's even thinking about giving them up.
So, Mark, what I want you to explain real quick for people watching right now who say, okay, let's just look at what happened Thursday night. By every account, it was a disaster politically for Biden. He then has his base, or at least part of his base. I'm not the Hollywood base led by George Clooney. Some of these House Democrats openly calling for his resignation. People like Obama and Pelosi not giving him a full-throated endorsement. If I'm a casual viewer of politics and I'm sitting at home anywhere in America right now, I would assume that there would be a decent shift in polling. Why hasn't there been?
Well, I think there's three explanations for why. Now, I think we got to lay down the predicate. Biden was behind before the debate and had a very narrow path to winning, and the debate hasn't helped him. So saying what we're about to say doesn't mean, this race is super tight. Trump is still ahead meaningfully. Three reasons why the debate may not have helped him. Number one, people are locked in, right? People who don't like Trump are not going to switch away from Biden because they know Biden is the vehicle to beat Trump. Number two, the Biden campaign argued, and they might be right, they argued this on debate night and the next day, that while everybody focused on Biden's mental acuity as it was displayed vividly at the debate, Donald Trump defended his position on abortion, which is unpopular. Donald Trump talked in a style that a lot of independents and other voters don't like. So it's possible that we were too focused on Biden's performance and not enough on Trump's. And then finally, Trump has a ceiling of support. There are people, when they say, I would vote for a slinky in a jar over Donald Trump if those are the choices, they mean it. And so it's possible that, you just have, as a factor in this race, people have strong feelings about Biden, but they also have strong feelings about Trump. And that it's what Biden did in Atlanta was the acuity version of shooting someone on Fifth Avenue. They're just not going to care about that because there's other things like Donald Trump that matter more to them.
Let me throw out like a 4A, like a small subset of exactly what you talked about, which is that we're looking at it also to some degree incorrectly. We're looking at these national polls, which again, I get shows momentum and movement. But at the same time, I'm reading about Wisconsin, a battleground state, which shows Trump up 6 points. I'm reading about Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, Minnesota that show tight races. When you look at it through the context of a national race, which is what this NPR poll does this morning, you're factoring in the New York, the Californias, the Texases, which are hardcore respondents that weren't going to move. This goes to your first point.
Yeah.
But when you actually start to look at it through the path in which you win electorally through these states, it did shift a little. And I guess that goes to point two, which is a lot of this, when you actually look at how you win, the Wisconsins, the other battleground states, it still is Trump ahead significantly. And these same people will say, well, Trump could win in a landslide electorally potentially. And I think is part of it that we're looking at it incorrectly?
Well, it's possible, although the one Wisconsin poll people seized on rightly, but we don't have enough battleground state data. And I hope if I worked at one of these news organizations throwing money down the drain on national polls, I would have been able to argue either let's give it to charity or let's do two battleground state polls. Imagine, in terms of understanding where things are, which is, I think, the point of these polls. And in terms of getting, pickup for them for media hit, same thing. Why not do Arizona and Pennsylvania rather than a national poll? I don't get it. The only thing I'll say about the national polls is if you looked at the tone and tenor of the coverage of the debate, you would have expected Joe Biden to either collapse nationally or suffer a 3 or 4 point loss. And some of the other national polls do show that. But
I think about it. I think about it like this. Let me also pose this. Let's just play this out for a second to your point about a national poll. Let's say George Clooney's at home in LA and the phone rang Friday morning and it said, "Who are you supporting for president?" I still think he would say on the phone to the pollster, Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, my point is that even the folks that are saying they don't want him to run aren't saying they wouldn't vote for him. They're saying, I would rather have a replacement. Yeah. And that dynamic matters. It's not that they're saying they won't vote for him. This is not a never Trump type of vote.
100%.
It's saying I'd rather replace him.
100%. And including, for all we know, we'll write him a check in the fall if he's still the nominee. Right. I think you're absolutely right. And if the Washington Post poll is not just completely messed up, people say, the Post headline on the poll was, 75% of people think Biden should step down or doesn't have the acuity. I forget what it is. It doesn't matter because they could, you could, to your point, there are plenty of voters who believe two things. Joe Biden has no business being president given his level of mental acuity. And if the choice is Biden versus Trump, they'll still vote for him. Now, there's some people I've talked to after the debate. Mark McKinnon is one of them, who said, I was going to vote for Biden. I'm not going to vote for Trump now, but I'm not going to vote for Biden. I can't in good conscience vote for Biden. And so not vote write-in, vote for Kennedy, whatever it is. People thought there'd be more of that, right? And the Marist poll and the ABC, NPR poll and the Washington Post poll suggest, no, your point of view. I wish that we'd have a new nominee, but if Biden's the nominee, of course I'm going to vote for Biden over Trump.
It's kind of the same dynamic on a lot of Trump voters, right?
Exactly.
Which is, I don't love Donald Trump, but given the choices, I'm with him. And it's not saying I want him. It's saying I'll vote for him. We had this dynamic that we talked about in 2016 called upshifting the downshifters, getting people to vote for Trump who weren't necessarily enthralled with him, but didn't like Hillary Clinton. And we said, hey, it's a binary choice. You got to vote for somebody.
1,000,000%. 1,000,000%. And I intended to make that point in responding to, and I failed. But yeah, I mean, you could think of a million things to say about Trump. His position on abortion, his social media practices, his behavior on January 6th. If you ask in a poll, do you approve of Trump's behavior on January 6th? Lots of Trump voters would say no. But if the choice is Biden-Trump, they'll still vote Trump.
All right, so let's just walk through, because I think you've made this point over and over again, correctly so. These are Biden's delegates, okay? So if you are a Democrat right now, you're George Clooney, you're whomever, and you want him to step aside, what is the potential timeline look like for a glimmer of hope if you want your wish to come true?
Right. We don't know the exact timeline because the Democrats have to have some committee meetings later in July to set the date for this unprecedented or unusual virtual roll call, which they're doing, they say, to make sure that Biden can get on the Ohio ballot because Ohio might change their law in a way that if they waited to nominate him in a traditional roll call at the convention would be too late. So that date will probably be in late July. And obviously something could happen after he's nominated virtually, but before the convention or even after the convention that could necessitate a swap out. But it's going to be a lot harder the bar is going to be even higher to get him to agree to a swap out. So I think they have a couple of weeks to convince him that it's not in his interest, or the party's interest, or the nation's interest to run. And a week of that will be taken up by the Republican convention when it'll be harder to have pressure. And Congress is gone now. And so Could the pressure somehow be created with Congress out of town? Much harder to do because they're not together. They're not as prone to create some sort of beehive activity. I think literally now, in using the best imagination I have, only an investigative story that said they lied about his diagnosis and his treatment. I think that's the only thing I can think of now that would have to occur between now and the roll call that could make this go in a different direction than it currently is.
Since you brought that up, do you think it was odd last night that not one question about the doctor or diagnosis? I mean, you've got this New York Times reporting and the New York Post reporting about this Parkinson's doctor. The White House seemingly caught in at best a contradiction, if not a lie, about the role of Dr. Kennard, this neurologist / Parkinson's expert. Not one question about his medical history or current treatment.
Yeah. I was not a big fan of the wording of the questions. I thought the wording of the questions was extremely flabby, not focused, too long, too many yes/no questions, which you should never ask anybody in any press conference or interview. I just, with all due respect to the reporters who got called on, I thought the topic you raised and several others, well-crafted, short questions would have been a lot better than the flabby, meandering, aimless ones that didn't produce information for voters.
What other question do you think was missed last night?
Well, I would have just. I think there's several questions regarding his both the examinations he has gotten, but also, again, I didn't spend the time crafting the language, but I think a question like this, which is, you obviously have shown signs of loss of mental acuity. How could it be that you don't want a cognitive exam? How could your family not insist that you have a comprehensive cognitive exam so you could be clearly diagnosed? Number one. Number two, you've not made either your doctor or any imaging you've had done of your brain available to the public. How can you justify that as commander-in-chief who's asking for 4 more years? Would have asked those. And then I would have asked him to be more introspective and say, you've acknowledged that you don't talk the way you used to, you don't move the way you used to, but walk us through your full understanding of the degree of your decline.
Why? You know, it was interesting because I had the same thought you did about the questions. I thought they were sloppy. They didn't allow for a good answer. Is it, in your experience, you've been in multiple newsrooms, are these reporters coming up with them themselves for a press conference of this magnitude, or is the bureau chief or other folks helping to craft it? Because, like, let's say that you're Reuters or the AP or the New York Times or NBC News. You know you're getting a question, okay? So who's involved in crafting it? Does the correspondent generally have complete carte blanche to craft it? Do they run it by someone, or does it come from up high?
It ranges. It depends on the news organization, the person, their relationship with their colleagues. The range of people they might get help from could include a spouse, their colleagues on the beat. In other words, they all have multiple people covering the White House, a bureau chief, an executive in New York, if it's a New York-based organization. It varies every time. But some correspondents who, are very experienced, whatever, they just do it themselves. I always would write it down. Again, no yes, no questions, no question they're expecting, no question they've been asked, as short as possible. And then I would do that myself. And then I would always show it to at least one person I trusted to let them help me workshop it to make sure, is it as short as possible? And does it maximize the chances of getting a good answer? Or if they dodge the question, the fact that they dodged the question is put in the sharpest possible relief.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because there's so many times when I'm with you, I'll bounce some stuff off because people would say to me, if I were asked that, this is how I'd answer it. I'd say, wow, that's actually a really good response. Yeah. I got to get this tighter. And I felt like last night was really sloppy. Let me kind of move on to the Kamala factor here. They leaked out that they were testing Kamala Harris's prowess against Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. Is that because they want to undermine Kamala and say, see, Joe Biden does the best, which is what a lot of reporting suggested this morning, that he's still the best Democrat? Or is it they wanted to force Biden's hand by saying, actually, Kamala does better?
I couldn't get anyone to tell me, but I'm pretty sure it's the former.
So what does that say, though? And I'm being serious. Like, I mean, my partisanship is well known, that this guy is the best Democrat. I find it, to be completely honest, I find this really odd that you're saying the guy like at this, when you test every Democrat in the country right now, this is the best that they can do?
Well, look, he's ahead in the Marist poll. So, I've said for a long time, he should have gotten that long ago. But at this point, he may well still be the strongest. And the polling backs that up. Harris's polling is a little bit legit because people know her, but she's not been seen in the light that they would try to cast her with a big launch and image crafting. But she's done well in some of these polls, better than Biden. The other people, they're totally unknown. There's just no way to poll them. You could focus group them and show people video, but these other polls are ridiculous. I agree with Joe Biden, and he said this last night. It was one of the, I thought, more undercovered elements of the press conference, and his team has been saying it to donors and electeds, which is, you think these people can, from a standing start, walk right in and beat Donald Trump? Like, Biden is a known quantity with a campaign structure that's built, with a donor network, with a team that understands how to win presidential elections. None of these other people have anything like that, including the vice president for the most part. So there's lots of things that make a strong presidential candidate. Having extreme mental decline put on vivid display is not one of them. And the others don't have that. But they don't have a lot of things that Joe Biden has that make him a strong presidential candidate compared to them.
Yeah, I agree. That's the thing. I don't think people appreciate this. For a lot of other reasons, I want Joe Biden to stay in the race. We know him as a candidate, that his record, et cetera, et cetera. All right, a couple more things I want to cover quickly. For all the people who are trying to push him out of the race, I've made the case to the audience before. I don't think he really cares what Obama says. I don't know that he cares about what anyone but Jill, maybe Valerie, his sister, maybe a couple of the top aides, the Donnellan, Richettis, et cetera. But here's what I don't get. If you're Barack Obama and you know him and you know, like, what is Obama doing right now? I feel like this is literally back in the Trump days of backstabbing the guy, trying to undermine him. Like, it's like he sends out this tweet, and then Obama basically, from all the reporting, is having conversations with Pelosi and everyone else, trying to say, yeah, we got to replace the guy and I got concerns. Is it just that I want to be clear for history I didn't like him?
I just speculation, but I think he uses the justification that, well, if I press Joe, it'll only get his back up to, continue to just enjoy his life and not be particularly involved. His phone's ringing off the hook. People would like him to get involved, but I think, from my sense of things, is he's saying, I forced the guy not to run in 2016. He resents.
Yeah, but it's leaking out. I guess what I'm asking, Mark, is it's leaking out that he is saying, I don't have confidence in him.
Yeah, but
if you're Biden, you're saying
he hasn't confidence in him ever, and he hasn't had confidence in his winning this race for a year. So that's not new. All we know he's done is he sent out a positive tweet. He talked to Pelosi at least once, and he signed off on the Clooney op-ed. Otherwise, I think he's just looking down at his cell phone and seeing donor people who gave him a lot of money or raised a lot of money for him, calling him up. And he's like, whatever, not my job, man.
Let's switch gears real quick. Donald Trump, he still has to make a VP selection. When do you think he makes it, and who does he select?
I've narrowed it down to two, according to my sources. It's either Sunday in the Midwest, J.D. Vance, or it's Professor Plum in the conservatory with a candlestick.
The candlestick.
I think it's J.D. Vance. Just all my sources are telling me that he didn't feel totally, in the end, super comfortable with Rubio, kind of on an interpersonal basis. And Burgum just is too risky, could end up like Sarah Palin in a suit. So I think it's Vance.
So when do you think we get the tell? If it's in the Midwest, he's got to fly somewhere. Does he have a pre-scheduled event?
He's got an event in Pennsylvania on Saturday, but he can go wherever he wants after that. He doesn't have press traveling with him.
Right, but he's got to plan something. I mean, I remember I was part of that when we did it in 2016, and everybody knew what was going on.
Yeah, they could throw on an event at the last minute. The advanced people could have it all worked out.
All right. Last thing I want to touch on, you and I and are getting a band together on Monday. I'll since it's my show, I'll let you be you can announce it on this. What are we doing and why?
8:30 every weekday starting this Monday, first day of the convention, 8:30 Eastern time, 25 minutes, the morning meeting. It's based on the network, television networks' morning calls, whether it's Fox or NBC. They do these morning calls, which are one of the great ways for people to know what's happening. What's on the schedule that day with Biden, with Trump, everything else that's going on. When are they happening? What do we expect to have happen at those events? What's the narrative line of the day? Who's going to win the day? What news stories are out there that people are tracking? So Tim Hogan, Democratic strategist, the two of us, will convene everybody on our new platform, Two Way. You can watch it on Two Way. You can watch it live on your platform, Sean, or on Two Way's platform. And it's a chance to start your day, whether you've got business interests in the outcome of the election, whether you're just a political junkie. Start your day with us to get great insight. I don't think you'll be able to get anywhere and be able to ask us questions, because this platform is about letting people ask questions. So you'll be able to hear us talk for a bit about what's going on, and then you'll be able to ask us or offer your comments.
Yeah, I'm really excited. As I've said to you before, it's kind of interesting. You've created the Note. You've led this effort among networks to get together in these calls wherever you've gone and kind of get everyone attuned to what's happening, what the big decisions are, what the big moments are going to be that day. I've been on the receiving end. I've then gone after those calls. I get all the reporters to call and say, this is what we want to know about, what's happening. And so to be able to provide people insight as to what's going to happen on any given day in a very concise way that they can participate on every morning is going to be fascinating. So as we head into the conventions, and you guys want to know what's happening, again, Mark's platform, my platforms, Tim, we're going to really give you that concise 25-minute interactive way of understanding the day. I look forward to it. Mark, as always, thanks for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you Monday morning.
Thank you, Sean. 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. We'll see everybody there on the morning meeting.
You bet. All right, thanks, Mark, for that conversation. Now let's keep it going with Reagan Reese of the Daily Caller. All right, Reagan, tell me, what did you guys think and how did you report out this press conference?
Yeah, I think it was the best case scenario for President Biden and his campaign. Worst case scenario for Democrats and those who want Biden out and are concerned about his chances of winning. The president really hit a sweet spot last night. He had some major gaffes, one before the press conference even started. I think he really primed himself for low expectations, where he, went to announce President Zelensky and called him President Putin. That was unreal. My jaw kind of dropped. And then minutes into the debate, he called Vice President Kamala Harris President Trump. But aside from that, Biden...
By the way, did you know, I have a theory there, which is that what Trump should have done is immediately accepted the job of vice president, enacted the 25th Amendment, gotten Biden out, and then become president right away. Boom! That was my theory right away. Trump should have said, great, I'm the vice president. I want to enact the 25th Amendment. He becomes president, Biden's out, Harris is pushed away, and everything is solved. I had it down.
I think it would have, I've been looking for that Trump statement or something from the Trump team. And I think that's something that's been so unique about this campaign through this whole debacle with Biden and watching the Democrats implode on themselves. They've kind of just stepped back and remained relatively quiet, which I think has allowed the Democrats to just freak out even more because they want Trump to do something to take away from the fact that they are imploding. And now that his sentencing isn't coming on July 11th to save them and get something out of the news cycle, they're screwed. And so anyways, last night, I just thought that he really, survived to see another day. It was a Biden that was very confident in what he has to offer and what he has to bring to this race. And he showed, I think, his haters that he's not dropping out.
Yeah, you guys, the story, this is in the Daily Caller, President Joe Biden managed to ease some concerns about his political future, though he also committed some crucial gaffes during a choreographed press conference Thursday night. I think that sums it up exactly. I think it was a push, right? The Republicans right off the bat got the Trump thing, the Putin thing, and then he waxed philosophically about foreign policy that put a lot of people at ease. I think he lives to fight another day because of this. And that's what I think mattered last night was, can he do this? I think if you're a Democrat that wanted him out of the race, he just bought himself at least a bunch of time.
Yeah, and I think the choreographed press conference really helped Biden with his chances of living to see another day.
Who got to, by the way, can I just ask this? We use the word choreographed. You use it in the story that you wrote. You've mentioned it. How did I brought this up with Mark Halperin? Who got invited? How did that work? How is that different for the audience to understand than, say, if he had gone to the press briefing room at the White House?
Yeah, so for the press briefing, you had to be credentialed to go to the NATO conference. So there's that, that accent or that background that this press conference had a foreign policy nature to it. That was like the backdrop of the discussion. So, anyone with a White House hard pass was welcome to apply. So that means that you can get in and out of the White House frequently, whenever you want, basically, as a reporter. There are reporters who don't have White House hard passes. So just being a random reporter, a Washington correspondent, but you don't have access to the White House, you could not apply for that. And then people got credentialed from there to go into the press conference. So there are reports that some people, got turned away. I saw that Newsmax got turned away. I was not credentialed to go to the NATO event. Epoch Times, I know, also got turned away from the press conference. And then from there were 8 reporters who were chosen by the White House press office to ask the president questions. And I thought that was a really unique situation. This is the president's big break. He needed to really prove himself here, and he couldn't even call on reporters like Karine Jean-Pierre calls on reporters in the White House press briefings. He had a list that he told everybody that he had to call on 8 reporters ahead of time that the White House approved. And then he took one question off the cuff and a shouted question as he was walking off stage.
What did it say to you that, according to the reporting, it was Anita Dunn that chose those 8 reporters, not Karine Jean-Pierre? And I know this is a little inside baseball for folks, but to your point, the White House press secretary, that's their job. And the idea that they didn't even let Karine choose the reporters doesn't speak, to me at least, as a former press secretary, about having a ton of confidence in the press secretary. What did it say to you that wasn't how it unfolded last night?
It seemed to almost confirm Stephen Nelson's reporting over at the New York Post that Anita Dunn and other top advisors are trying to push out Karine Jean-Pierre from that role. He did a report a while back that, Karine has been in this press secretary job for about 2 years. That's about how long press secretaries stay in this position. She was offered another job and she turned it down to go be, I believe she was going to head up Emily's list. And so Stephen detailed this report about how top aides, including Anita Dunn at the White House, had kind of orchestrated this effort to try to push Karine out and, coaxed Emily's list to offer Karine that job because they don't think that she is doing a good job in this press secretary role. Meanwhile, in that report, Stephen wrote that Karine believes that she's doing a great job and that she thinks, her haters are wrong. And there's also that backdrop also of John Kirby, the national security spokesperson, eyeing that job as well and wanting to be at the podium. But yeah, I think it really just displayed the fact that they don't have confidence in her and that they want her out.
Last night's press conference was to start at 5:30. Then they pushed it to 6:30. Then he didn't arrive until after 7. I mean, the funny part about it is I didn't see media starting to get into a frenzy the way it normally would have. Like, why is he late? What's happening? Is this just sort of baked in? Do you guys, as a press corps, go, here he is, he's late again? Why wasn't that chatter and fodder last night the way I would have thought it would be?
I think you're right in saying that he's always late. The press briefings are always delayed. The other day, it was 90 minutes late and we were given no explanation. And it starts to be, I've heard from reporters who kind of find it insulting and rude that, the press briefings continuously are delayed. And then if you have any meetings throughout the day, you have to cancel them to go to this press briefing. And so I think it's the same with the president being late. I was not surprised. It was already delayed in the morning and it was kind of like, oh, this is the inevitable. This was going to happen. I had to think, though, you start to wonder in the back of your mind, he just walks off the stage and says Zelensky is Putin and makes this major gaffe. And then they're an hour late to the press conference. Really not a good showing. And I think
But that's what I mean. That's what I mean, though, right? I think you're hitting the nail on the head. He makes this major gaffe. He calls Zelensky Putin, and then they're an hour and whatever late. And I'd be like, oh God, are they sitting him down? Or like, this is a picture of Putin. This is a picture of Zelensky. Like, I really do. Or did they say, quick, let's do a cat nap? I don't know. But I would have said, wow, what are they doing now in that hour to get him ready after that gaffe? It wasn't like there was a meeting that was running late that everybody knew about. That was a major gaffe. And then he's an hour and a half late. I would have assumed something's not right. And there would have been speculation among the press corps. I know if this had been the Trump administration, they would have been going crazy. Maybe aliens abducted him. They would have gone crazy. And yet nothing that I saw last night that warranted any concern among the press corps that right after a massive gaffe like this, he's an hour and change late.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, that I felt like the hysteria or the response to that was rather muted. I also felt like the questions last night were a light grilling of the president of the United States in what is, unprecedented. The Democratic Party is imploding on itself. They're calling for the leader of their party to step down. There's serious concern about whether the president of the United States can, run the country if he's awake after 4 p.m. And when is if we got bombed, would the president be awake? Meanwhile, I felt like the questions were rather muted and not what was expected from the press corps last night. In part, I think that's because the questions were chosen, and also because the White House staff, I don't know if you caught this, Sean, has a really firm grip on the microphone when reporters are asking questions. And I was like, this is that quote unquote big boy press conference. Shouldn't we let the reporters hold the microphones themselves and kind of interject and allow a back and forth with the president of the United States? I think that would prove his fitness for office. I'm glad you brought up the questions, but I think the back and forth is great too, because he said a lot of stuff. You can call it lies, gaffes, exaggeration. This was the greatest meeting ever, right? And he talked about that. No one could do better than I would. Everybody's complimenting me. There were a lot of things that he said that I thought, there's no follow-up here. There's no challenge to this. I mean, he's saying even about his own mental fitness, et cetera. There was no follow-up that I thought would have been normally warranted during a press conference. And I thought that was really interesting. No discussion about the Parkinson's doctors, right? There was a lot of things that weren't covered last night that I thought was really interesting. And to your point, no follow-up by these reporters permitted, and they didn't seem to really care. You remember that famous interaction with Jim Acosta and Trump where he's wrestling the microphone. I mean, they didn't seem to care that they weren't getting slighted. It was sort of like, okay, thank you. I'll sit down now. That's a result of how this administration has treated the press. I think back to that press briefing following the president's debate performance where CBS's Ed O'Keefe pressed Karine Jean-Pierre on giving misleading answers and not answering the question. And she called it unprofessional and a personal attack, that the press was stating a fact, that he finally chose to get frustrated and say, no, you're not answering our question. Sean, if I remember correctly, that would happen all the time during the Trump administration, where reporters would pipe up and yell and interject. And it was never, a personal attack that, you would characterize it as. And so I think the White House took offense to that and has treated the press like they're zoo animals and need to keep them boxed in. And that's resulted in these reporters, not wanting to offend the administration, not wanting to rustle any feathers. It's time that you wrestle that microphone away and you ask the president of the United States if he's been diagnosed with Parkinson's, if he's being treated for Parkinson's or dementia or any other problems.
So the news is going to shift to Trump, the VP, and the RNC next week. What are you guys looking at next week as big moments that are going to make a difference potentially in this race?
I'm really curious to see if the RNC and the VP pick, what's going on with Trump, is going to take away any of the attention from the president. There was a report that Nancy Pelosi may be telling Democrats to hold their revolts of President Biden until Friday, until after the NATO summit. And that, I think, could be an attempt to maybe keep the conversation muted and focus on Trump. The VP pick, I definitely think, is going to open up a whole new line of attack from the Biden campaign and Democrats on the Trump campaign. But above all, Sean, this is really the first convention we've seen in 8 years. Yeah. And it's going to be very different from 2016, where there were kind of revolts against Trump and not everybody was on the same team. 2020, there was a pandemic. 2024, President Trump has people on his side. This is Trump's party. This is Trump's convention. And so I think there's going to be a very different feel. And I'm excited to see how that unifies the party and to report that out.
Okay. Reagan Reese, I appreciate everything that you guys do over there at the Daily Caller to keep us informed and to ask the questions that people, frankly, aren't asking and to cover the things that aren't getting covered by the left-wing media. So thanks for sharing your insight with us, as always. I appreciate it. Look forward to getting updates from Milwaukee and from the RNC, from you guys, and from you in particular. Thanks for being with us today. All right, folks, remember, we are going to go live after the president makes his VP pick. So stay tuned. Hit that notification button on YouTube. You'll be able to watch it across platforms. But make sure you're subscribing and hitting that notification button. It's so critical. YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iHeart, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Remember, you can get the Front Row Joe's movie. This is a perfect thing at salemnow.com. The DVD is for sale as well. And all things Sean Spicer at my Substack, SeanSpicer.com. We provide updates. We engage in a chat. It's always fun. I appreciate you being with us. We'll be back Monday, but if our predictions are right, I will see you live over the weekend to break down the Trump nomination. Hit that notification button right now. We'll see you back here on Monday, though, for the Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.